All right, we're back with the Narrative Unsuppressed Gun Talk Radio. It's just Sean and I in the studio today. We're here to talk about a product.
Oh, we're rolling this bad boy.
Yeah, we are rolling.
No prep time. Just throwing me in there like that. I like it.
Right to the wolves, man. Yeah, we're going to talk about a product that it's one of my personal favorites for many different reasons. And, going off of what people are saying about it on social media, I think it's many fan faves across the industry. But before that, we're going to get into sponsors. We just have one of them. Just have one of them for now. And that sponsor is Celtic Shield. It is the only never quit wallet. It's 100% RFID proof. The manufacturing process behind each wallet is clean, to say the least. Clean lines, clean anodizing, across the board, just a super badass product. It's 100% veteran-owned and operated. Actually, it's a one-man show, and he assembles and ships wallets to, from his doorstep to yours without any questions asked. They do laser engraving for units, fire departments, police departments.
It's a total custom.
It is a total custom deal. It is a total custom deal. These things are durable as hell too. I've said it before. I've literally hammered tent stakes into a rock solid ground at a baseball tournament a couple of years ago.
It's definitely a beast of a wallet.
It is. So
I like mine. It took some time getting used to it.
It does.
You come from a traditional wallet, but once you get used to it, feel like all my stuff's secure in it, and I dig it.
Yep. If you go to from the typical bifold or trifold wallet and then to this, it's an acquired taste. But once you acquire that taste, it's I don't think you'll ever look back. I know I haven't. But if you want a discount, you can go to CelticShield.com. Put in the brass tacks, all one word, or the narrative 2A for a 10% discount. So if those of you that are listening that that want a peace of mind that your credit card information, your magnetic information, whether it be government IDs or whatever, is secure, go ahead to CelticShield.com and order yourself a wallet. They're also on social media, Instagram at Celtic Shield or Facebook at the same thing, Celtic Shield. So go check them out, brass tacks or narrative 2A for a 10% discount.
Sweet.
We got a product that we're gonna chop up today, don't we, Sean? It's a shoulder fired or pistol configured product.
I used to love this world. I still get pretty turned on by short barrel rifles, and now there are a lot of pistols out there. I'm still at heart a purist in the short barrel rifle world, but I get the benefits of the pistol/pistol brace weapons. But needless to say, this is a sexy little package that takes me back to years before when I would have literally done anything for a weapons platform like this. And since I've gotten away from it and into more of these long precision rifles, which is just really strange to me, it's not that I'm less attracted to them. I'm not as hype when I see them, but this is awesome. The Sig Rattler.
Yeah, the Sig Rattler. It was like the unicorn for me when I first saw it. I first heard about it from you, actually. You got it for some other projects, and you told me what you could about it.
Yeah.
Until I got my hands on it, I didn't really appreciate what it was. We got a pistol variant at first, and then we've done all the paperwork to convert into an SBR. So, the Rattler in itself, 300 blackout, which
big bullet,
pretty versatile bullet.
Which we like it.
I wouldn't say it's the longest of distance bullets, but it's good cross, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and so I did the 6.8 SPC thing, which I still have, by the way, and that was that because we felt 5.56 wasn't effective in shorter barrels. So I remember when the 6.0 SPC was developed, and did that for a while. Now we're on to the 300, and I just think we got to decide how how we honestly think we're going to use the weapon platform. I mean, you can't have a weapon platform like this, compact, does well suppressed, and then expect it to shoot 850 yards like a bolt action rifle.
Yep.
And so I don't even know that we even have to mention the range, because we don't do that with an MP5.
Right.
We go, hey, it's an MP5. And, oh, it's MP5. It's this. And we don't talk, well, you can't shoot 600. We don't do that. So I don't think we need to do it with
especially out of a 5-inch barrel or 7-inch barrel.
And maybe it's just because this is a rifle caliber that maybe we feel the need that we have to mention
distance,
extended ranges with.
Yep.
I don't think we need to do that.
Again, same thing with everything else. It's driven from the practicality of why the weapon system was developed.
Right.
In the Rattler in itself, oddly enough, I think was, and this isn't in accordance with any kind of insider backdoor information that we've obtained, but more on the open source realms. There was a group of British special operations guys that toured the SIG facility looking for a specific end-use application. And why that's odd, because it was that same group of individuals that I think put the HK's MP5 on the forefront of where it is now.
Interesting.
The unicorn of subguns, so to speak.
I'd heard it was some sort of unit or something involved, but I don't have much.
Right, and of course, like with all that stuff, man, that's what makes the firearms industry and our is in the United States and our allies special operations communities so good, is because they do a pretty damn good job of keeping things compartmentalized until it doesn't need to be.
Yeah, it's good.
So we're not trying to blow anybody out of the water or anything, but we feel that it is important to go through a brief history lesson, for lack of better terms, or why the system was developed. And this group of individuals, they really put the MP5, I think, on the map in many people's regards. Maybe not in the technical sense, but where the MP5 was kind of put into the limelight in the 80s at the British embassy, or at the embassy in Great Britain, when there was a terrorist standoff. So I think the lead image and a lot of the front pages of newspapers had some operators getting ready to make entry into a window wielding that MP5 A3.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I think that's, across the industry, especially for HK enthusiasts, like a lot of diehard HK people probably have that picture framed and up on their wall somewhere. Right. It was a pretty badass picture too, but nonetheless, as times develop, tactics evolve, the need for specific hard end use weapon systems evolved, going to a bigger caliber with maybe some of the same or better functions as the Rattler possesses, which we'll get into, go down the feature list. I think it's a no-brainer.
Well, that's something you can speak to. It's often complaint when we get into short weapons is the effectiveness of, pistol caliber carbines, SBRs, ineffectiveness. I cannot speak professionally to that because it's not what I do. I'm a civilian that uses mine from a self-defense standpoint. And I'm going to assume effectiveness at the time that it's needed. Hopefully that's never the case, but so you can speak to that, and you can speak to a weapons platform of this size and pistol calibers versus rifle calibers. Where do you see this fitting into what you do or have done? Does it bring something better to the table, something you wish you had 3 or 4 years ago?
It absolutely does, and here's why. When I first joined the Marines and got to Fast Company, our primary weapon system of choice was the MP5. Okay. That fit our specific mission profile simply due to the fact that we were the quick reaction force for the entire U.S. Naval Fifth Fleet. Right. So what that means is something happened across wherever the Fifth Naval Fleet was, we would jump on a plane, go to our place of forward deployment, and then jump on helicopters and board the ship and take the ship back. All in an effort for, the securement of nuclear powered naval vessels.
Okay.
So where that comes into our weaponry is, and the MP5 specifically, is a pistol caliber that does not have a bunch of overpenetration when you're, potentially shooting around nuclear reactors.
Sure.
That power ships.
Bullets and nuclear reactors.
Bad day.
Probably don't mix well.
Right. So, obviously as times evolve, tactics evolve, what we saw was the need for a longer range weapon system, and that's where obviously we went to the M4 carbine. Okay. Did away with the MP5, took them out of our armory not took them out of our armory in the sense of turn them in and, never use them again, but we didn't draw them as prevalently as we used to. Right. So where the MP5, where the Rattler would come in modern times, 3 or 4 years ago, back to your question, is the concealability aspect.
Right.
The aspect of directly supporting protective security operations. Okay. Sometimes, or more times than not, when you're working in non-permissive environments, or austere environments, rather, you need the ability to go from zero to hero in no time flat. Right. And 0 to hero no time flat typically looks like a less invasive kit out. Right. So we're not walking the 2003, 2004, 2005 days of walking around with big, huge kit and 12 magazines and, the whole, pardon the pun, but shooting match. Right. Those days are pretty much over as active combat operations ceased. So the Rattler rather could be concealed to where a quick unfolding of the stock and switching that selector from safe to semi or auto, it's the value is immeasurable. Because a lot of times in government procurement processes and contracts, switching gears from active military to contracts now, we use what we use, right? We use what's
given to you.
Yeah.
Right.
What that contract says. And a lot of times that contract would say that our primary weapon systems were your atypical M4 carbine with 14.5-inch barrels and 6-position collapsible stock with, an aim point, just for sheer, just for an example. So for SIG to come out with this MCX offers a much broader spectrum of end use applications. Okay. Without getting into that max effective range debate.
Right.
At the end of the day, what a lot of people are doing in today's global war on terrorism is protective operations.
What's a reasonable range, though, from your point of view? With your background, you have expertise in this, but what is that reasonable range?
So, I mean, it's different, varied from mission profiles, right? So, like the more kinetic guys that are out and we'll just use Afghanistan for an example because that's to the public eye, that's what's going on, right? The guys that are out in the remote provinces, out detached from, we'll use the word civilized. Like civilization, for the most part, they're going to need something with range.
I get that.
Right. Because when they're doing security patrols, when they're, patrolling through, villages and there's distances of 20 kilometers or better in between, the chances of getting hit on those remote roads are greater than working around, let's say, Kabul or any big city. Mm-hmm. But as the guys that are in town doing those protective security operations, you might, 100 yards at most, and that's even stretching because
100 yards unobstructed
right.
is hard
Yep.
to find, right?
It's very hard to find. But even with that, taking what we know about about the bad guys, what we've learned in the last 17 years is, those guys aren't. I mean, they're not rifle arrows. They're not pistol arrows. They'd rather hit you with a roadside bomb and then hit you with some sporadics or a very very compartmentalized case of small arms fire right afterwards. Whether it be PKM or AKs or whatever. They'd rather do that rather than pick a full on sustained gunfight with you. So with that, if you have the ability to get off that proverbial X, if you have the ability to secure what you're there to do, and go home or get out of there as quickly as you possibly can, that's kind of the name of the game. Okay. Increase survivability without being too overt in your I'm here to shoot your face off type of deal. And I'm not speaking for everybody when it comes to that. I'm speaking to what I've been doing the last 12, 13 years.
Okay. So compare it to those platforms. Let's look at the M4 that you used, MP5.
Right.
And obviously you haven't used this in theater.
Nope.
But obviously, and you use it here and you test it. What do you like about it compared to those other platforms? Is it a good platform that fills both of those roles, or do you still feel like,
well, so that's
I need the M4 on this end, and I still might need to go down to the MP5 on this end?
So the MP5 is a unicorn of guns for me. I love the MP5. I love everything about the MP5. I like it because it might have to do with it was one of the first guns that I got my hands on when I was in the Marines, and it kind of broke my cherry, so to speak, in that realm. So that might have something to do with it. Practically, in this day and age, for my end use application overseas, MP5 might not be. I'll walk that back. It wouldn't be my weapon of choice.
Okay.
It would not be my weapon of choice for a number of reasons. I'm not going to say it's obsolete because I think, in my opinion, that weapon system's timeless.
I assume it has to do with caliber.
It has to do a lot with caliber. It's got a lot to do with caliber, and
because it's not like the gun doesn't run.
No, it runs. It runs, and
It's not the king of malfunctions.
No, absolutely not, man. I've ran everything from 115 grain ball to 124 grain ball to Hydroshock to just recently the Novex 65 grain ARX, and not one single hiccup.
It's amazing.
So as far as reliability goes, I don't. It's going to be hard to find a weapon system to beat the MP5.
Gotcha.
Stacking the M4 up against the Rattler, the Rattler. What I love about it is its versatility. It's sheer versatility, and it can get done what I need to get done right now.
Okay.
Everything from the length to its compactness to its concealability, and I haven't had a malfunction with it yet either.
Nice.
The M4. I can't say that they're mass produced, right? I can't say they're mass produced junk, as I've heard people refer to them as in the past, comparing them to AKs. At the end of the day, those things have been in service for a very long time,
right,
and they've saved a lot of people's asses, to include mine,
sure,
in a lot of different situations. So, the M4, I mean, yes, we can, there was a point in time where we threw Lewis Machine and Tool 10-inch uppers on our Colt lowers, as per U.S. government, stipulations.
All right.
And they ran just fine. But one thing that we had a problem with shooting out of that, 10.5-inch barrel, was, shooting out of helicopters, for example. You're battling headwinds, you're battling, side winds, you're, everything that as you're shooting static on a flat range, throw out the window as it pertains to shooting from an aircraft. The MCX or the MCX Rattler, I don't foresee it being any different, but what I see is more more controllability because you don't have that 14-inch barrel. Because you don't even have that 10.5-inch barrel in a lot of cases, if we're talking about the LMT uppers. But what you're losing, obviously, is that, a little bit of range. But again, going back to that argument of, well, if you're there for protective operations, is there a need to reach out anything past 100? And the answer is probably not.
Right.
So, to the feel, trigger wise, all those things that people stack guns up against each other for, to the trigger. I mean, I don't feel it any much different than the M4.
Right.
It does have ambidextrous controls up to and including the charging handle, which is huge.
Which I appreciate.
I fully appreciate the ambidextrous controls. Everything else is virtually like, once you shoot a black gun, once you get proficient with a black gun, I mean, you're going to hold that black gun how you're going to hold it, right? For example, your strong hand on the pistol grip. People are going to hold it how they hold it. They're going to position that butt stock where they're going to position it. I'm a center of the chest type of guy. It's just force of habit from, shooting PEC devices through nods. It's like, how we all know that when you got 15s or a set of 14s down, you're not going to get proper stock to cheek weld, especially if you're running a PEC, obviously.
We don't all know that, but
well,
yes.
I mean, anybody that's shot with IR devices,
Right,
I mean,
right.
you're looking for that. You're looking for the laser. You're not necessarily looking down, looking for that reticle.
Right.
Another thing that I like about the MCX is that full length top rail. So that gives you that versatility to mount a true mount, right? Not any kind of offset left or right or whatever of a PEC device, or if you want to forward mount your optics a little further, whatever the case is, if you want to compensate for a magnifier or whatever, the Rattler does do that for you. Whereas a lot of mil-spec or government issued M4s either come with that plastic handguard up front, or there's that space where your snap ring, there's that whatever half inch or whatever it is, and obviously gives a little bit of room for fluff one way or the other to your to compensate for your point of aim, point of impact.
So in the development of this weapon system, suppression was on the table from the start. So it's developed as a weapon system for, to be suppressed, and it wasn't an afterthought.
Right.
Clearly that's an advantage, but the systems that you used, how often did you run cans? I mean, was that the norm, or was that just rare?
That's rare. Like for us, for the M4s that we ran, and I'm not speaking for everybody that's overseas putting boot to ass, right?
Right.
I'm speaking from my end use application. We all ran A-frame front sights, and no cans with A2 birdcage hiders on the front. And that, again, that's, we were there in an overt capacity, right? For the most part, we weren't snooping and pooping. For the most part, like the surprise, speed, and violence of action, as in the military, that was huge. But as for protective security operations, everybody knew we were there, in Baghdad, Iraq, for example. I mean, it's, we're cruising around in Suburbans,
Right.
Rolling up to venues in, Suburbans with little bird helicopters buzzing around and Humvees and everything else. So it wasn't a secret that we were there. So being quiet wasn't necessarily a pile up on our priority list.
Okay, so you have to educate me a little bit. So when I think of those uses, I'm thinking about what is the overall effect and damage to not only the users yourself, but those that you're protecting, the principal, whomever that may be. I'm thinking about obviously hearing damage, concussive effects, those things that. Here's what I hear in a gunfight: you don't hear it, and then I hear guys say that's an absolute lie. Yep. So I'm always trying to figure out what's going to provide the best overall outcome should something happen. That's why I think, why not have a can on, so that the person that you're protecting, whatever something goes down, we don't have busted eardrums and that stuff that maybe doesn't have to happen.
Man,
And maybe I'm naive in that.
No, you're not. You're absolutely not. So we can look at this from a timestamp point of view, right? So 10 years ago, suppressors, to the layman, suppressors were for, especially in kinetic operations, man, suppressors were, there was that ability or that mindset of hearing damage and kind of keeping that fog of war in check,
right,
absent all
sure.
the crazy gunfire that's going on.
Right.
But going back to the hearing safe part of it, like that, I don't think that was necessarily a big factor, right?
Right.
Nowadays, with all the education that the American Suppressor Association's put out, paired up with like Silencer Co. and anybody else that's been in the suppressor business, that is, of course, that is on the forefront of everybody's minds.
Yeah, and I do think about the concussive effects.
Absolutely.
Something that loud in a confined space, whether it's concrete around you, steel,
it's
that
echoing,
rings
everything's
your bell.
bouncing.
And so you don't just, the movies, everybody's talking through this fire and they're in an underground, I don't know, like tank, right? like a ditch. And they're talking and they're firing M4s like, it's not going to happen like that.
It really isn't. And you mentioned what people say about you can't hear anything in a gunfight. Man, there is a little bit of audio exclusion that goes on. That's part of your natural defense mechanism, that fight or flight mechanism, right?
Okay.
Same thing goes with your tunnel vision, your loss of dexterity, and all those things that go along with a significant emotional event. But at the end of the day, decibels are decibels.
Right.
Whether you can hear them or not,
right.
There's not a barrier between your eardrum and what's going on 3 feet to your right or left.
Sure.
Or 16 and a half inches in front of you.
Right.
Obviously modern manufacturing processes and even old manufacturing processes have done a very good job with muzzle brakes and muzzle devices to deflect some of that energy. But at the end of the day, you're still getting that concussive injury. That's why a lot of guys, man, who've made a living out of carrying guns, have some sort of hearing damage on one level or the next. So, the Rattler was absolutely, like you said, developed with suppression in mind, hence the adjustable gas block. That's another thing that I didn't mention. Obviously, with the M4s, we never had those adjustable gas blocks. It was, like I said, direct impingement, like A-frame front sight housing with in gas blocks. So the importance of attaching a can quickly, I think, is invaluable at this point, especially as we progress as shooters, especially as we progress as manufacturers. That's a key role in that versatility of the Rattler.
Yeah, and I would assume that anything that allows the user to be at their best throughout use, no matter what that use is.
Yep.
Why would we not when we clearly have the technology available to do it
and the know-how?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And people, I don't think, are so closed off to things as they used to be. Like we hear that 1911 Glock argument, or we used to hear that 1911 Glock argument all the time. What works for the end user, right? AK versus M4 or AR, like, what works? Right. What works for your end use application? And it's hard for me to generalize and say the MCX Rattler is the ultimate end use weapon system, because it's not. That's like saying that the M24 is the ultimate end use precision or sniping application or application weapon system. It's not, man.
Okay. So let's cover a little bit about some of the things inside the Rattler. So 5.5 inch barrel, it's piston operated.
Right.
AR magazines, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, you can still, with an adapter, can't you use AR lowers on this still, or
I'm not for
I
sure.
know it was with the MCX, the large, but I can't recall with the Rattler. I think it's still the case.
I think so.
I have to check up on that.
Yep.
So civilian use. What are your thoughts about it? When I look at this weapon for me, and I've obviously had a lot of short guns. I look at the new thing is the backpack gun.
Yep. I was just
or the truck gun, the car gun, whatever you want to call it.
The off-body carry gun.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I like the idea of having something outside of what I'm carrying, EDC,
micro pistol or whatever
that is, and having this as an option should something go really south that you feel like you need additional firepower, something shoulder fired.
Well, so now's a perfect example of how we can, where that is, where we are in our industry right now, the debate that we're having. We'll just leave schools out of it altogether, but just people doing bad things to good people for no reason, right? And I always take it back to that you never want to bring a knife to a gunfight.
Right.
Okay? So if, living in a small town, you also live in a small town, like if something would happen at one of the local schools, we'd know about it probably pretty quickly.
Sure.
I'm not going to stand, especially having children. We'll go back to the school argument, but having kids in a couple schools within that district, I'm not going to sit at home and watch the news and find out what happens. I'm just not gonna, and you're not gonna. And anybody who is an assertive, confident, and competent gun enthusiast, right? Like in the civilian world, we're not going to sit back and, if anything else, we might go and say, what can we do to help?
Right. We just want to know something's being done.
What can we do to help? And I'm not saying, revert back to, we saw the YouTube and the Instagram clips of a certain person in Las Vegas, who was attending a concert. Now all of a sudden, just because he's deputized somewhere, now all of a sudden he's a law enforcement officer and he can bring down the gunman by himself, right? So I'm not saying that, and I'm not saying be a hero, but I'm saying going back to that, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. So where this is applicable in the civilian, and I'm using air quotes, civilian world is if you are proficient with off-body carry, with a system that can be that force multiplier should you need it. I think the Rattler is it. If you have if you have a vehicle to carry that weapon system without looking like a complete tool, right. We have open carry states that by the letter of the law, you can cross-body sling that thing and walk around with it. I would look at you and call you a tool, right?
Sure.
But back to your original question, there is an application for this thing in the continental United States as a law-abiding citizen that is very, very security and safety-minded. Controllability, especially if you live in a state where you can have suppressors, put a can on it. So now that again increases that survivability, increases that force multiplication without being so invasive that now you're running around looking like a one-man show.
Home defense. Where does it sit with you on home defense? I don't know exactly where it fits.
And what's the right answer, right?
I'm like a shotgun guy, and
Me
I hear
too.
good and bad about
Yep.
that. So,
I mean, from the time we grew up, right, from the time we got our hands on a gun, the most distinct sound on the planet is what?
That 12-gauge, any gauge pump, the pump action
a
shotgun.
Pump action shotgun putting a round into battery.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are, and I don't care how many drugs you're hopped up on, or any scenario you want to come up with. You hear a pump action shotgun get cycled, you know that, and if you're not the one doing it,
what's going on?
It's
or what's about to go down.
Abundantly clear that you might have 9 holes in you, or
right.
however many round or how many BBs are in regular shot. I don't know. So, if you're not a shotgun guy, if you're not a pistol guy or whatever, or you just want something with more capacity than a pistol, I think the MCX and 300 blackout with a subsonic round suppressed, like all the stars aligned, right? I think it is superior to an M4 or a typical, not M4, but just a typical AR.
Okay.
For home defense.
Okay.
Just for that magazine capacity, again, the subsonic rounds with suppressors, it's that round's not moving as fast as a typical 5.56 or 223 round. Again, it's that age-old argument, 9 mil versus 45. Right. Like home defense, you got a slow, hard-hitting 45 round with, the penetration.
And that's the thing. We have these debates, and I don't enter. I listen to them, but in the end, unless you've been shot and survived, shot and died,
right,
or you've actually had that scenario where you've had to use it, who can really speak to that? I mean, there's theory and there's science, and I understand that, but nobody's going to say, oh, I don't think that round's going to be effective. But no one's volunteering to take the first round. So
I'm here to tell you, like, I've never been shot, and I'll never, I'm not claiming that. But I've seen I've seen the devastating effects of, two specific NATO projectiles, and that's the 5.56 green tip, M855, 62 grain, and the 9mm 124 grain ball. Or hydroshock. It's not like the movies, right? So for anybody listening that that thinks that, I don't care how rapid of expanding round you have, or anything of that nature, like, it's not like the movies. People don't get flown off their feet from a round moving 2,660 feet per second, right? Like, physics comes into play here. Like, you have a round moving that fast at close distances, burning right through the person. And 9 out of 10 times, if they're, with their mentality, and they have that same adrenaline dump as you do. I mean, the human body's a human body. I don't care what ideals, religion, politics.
Resilient. It's a resilient thing.
Absolutely. When you have something burning through you at that point. Now, pending, that round cooking through a femur or something that's going to take the structural posture out of something, but we're trained to shoot center mass, most broad portion of the target, right? And yeah, there's terminal ballistics. We can go into all that, and that's a debate in itself. But a heavier round, switching back to home defense, a heavier round moving slower than the typical 5.56 or 223 rounds, obviously always going to be better, in my opinion. For follow-on shots, for penetration or over-penetration or lack thereof. Just all of those things, and like all those totalities that we argue about all the time, mixed into one bag, you've got to think of one thing, and that's increasing survivability and stopping somebody doing what they're doing in the quickest time possible. Because if you don't, I mean, I don't know the statistics on it, but it would be interesting to see, out of all of the forced entry or home defense scenarios where lethal force has been used, it would be interesting to see the amount of, or what the average time on target was. And when I say average time on target, I mean the sustained gunfight, the quote unquote sustained gunfight in a house.
Right.
I mean, I can't imagine that it would, like, anybody is going to, especially if I'm breaking into a house, I'm not going to get in a gunfight with the person that's in the house.
Right.
I'm like, oh shit, whoa, they have guns, I'm out. Maybe exchange 1 or 2 rounds again. I don't mean to armchair quarterback, and I've never, thank God that nobody's ever broken into my house. Or, I've never been in a house where it's been broken into. So, to sit here and definitively say, this is the ultimate, I don't know. But what I can say is I think there are features with the Rattler that will, again, help me increase my survivability versus other platforms, as it pertains to, rifle caliber or, otherwise.
All right. So you like what you like about the platform, and what do you feel like it might be missing? Is there something, well, I wish it had that? My complaints with any of the AR platforms was ambidextrous controls.
Right.
That was always my complaint. And when I found a good system, a lower or whatever that had the controls on both sides and good and not just sticking I forget what the name of that one ambidextrous mag release is that you can't even get any leverage on.
Right. I can't.
So as long as
either.
they didn't just stick that on, but if they really thought out those that lower, I was like, okay, that's something I could get into. So I don't really have a complaint about that. I'm still trying to figure out what I wish it were, and maybe there is nothing.
Well, so for me, if we're talking do-betters, so to speak.
Sure.
I like. We'll post up a picture of the particular platform we're talking about, but for me, the narrow stock,
okay,
and the skeletalized where a buffer tube would be,
right?
That would be a complaint for me.
Okay.
And when I say complaint, I mean, I like its narrow profile for that concealability aspect, and I know that's where Sig was going with it. But it's just, when I'm running it, I'm used to more of a, like an LWRC stock, right? To where it's short stature, but it still has the feel of a standard, butt stock. So I can achieve that good stock to cheek weld.
So it's just something you're used to having,
right?
Necessarily,
And
operationally you've done it this way,
yes,
with this type. So
yeah. So I don't know if that's a complaint, more so as an acquired taste.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I too, I like the ambidextrous controls. For working through malfunctions, with both hands versus chicken wing in the butt stock and locking the bolt back to the rear and doing everything you need to do from that standard control layout like most AR platforms have. The Rattler, you can do everything right then and there. Your magazine changes, your clearing of malfunctions, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And I think Sig has done a phenomenal job of taking into account that increasing of survivability when that weapon system has to be put into use when your life depended on it.
Gotcha.
One thing I want to talk about, and this does, this is standard across the board, is the optics choice. I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about optics for these types of weapon systems. We've ran everything from the Sig Romeo to one of our personal favorites. My personal favorite, anyway, is the loopholed LCO. I like that the reflexive optic. I don't necessarily know for my application that a hyper magnified optic on the MCX would be I'm not gonna say justified, but put to use in its intended purpose, right? Mm-hmm. I think that MCX was developed for close to short medium applications. To where I think a reflexive red dot or holographic sight would, is efficient.
Yeah.
As possible.
I like them on this platform. I like them as small as can be for the most part, but I do like the Romeo series that Sig has. And I just found that the dots seem to be extremely clean.
Yes.
On them.
There's not a halo effect around them.
Yeah.
They're crisp.
And it's funny when you ask, other guys in the industry and people that have used other options, they all actually say the same thing.
Yep.
And I remember asking guys, other reviewers in media, and say, hey, this is what I found. What did you find? And I just thought, well, is this all in my head?
Yeah.
And everybody's like, no, it's cleaner. So I dig that, and I like the size of those. And you've got the Leupold,
the LCO.
on this one. Yeah.
Yep. And the Leupold compared to the Romeo series, red dots, for lack of a better term, it is much larger. It does have
that's pretty big.
It does have a larger profile, but
yeah,
I like that larger objective.
I get it. I do too. I completely understand it.
I can stay in the optic and still have more periphery than I could coming out of the optic, and you know what I mean. So again, that's personal preference. And that's again what I'm used to.
what I think I like in this platform, though, is still I do like an iron sight option.
Yep.
Just to keep things low profiles, because here's what happens. We have this nice gun. It's sleek. It's compact, and we throw a 30-round magazine in it, and then we throw whatever optic of choice on top, and it adds another, I don't know, 2.5 inches.
Right.
So you've got this thing's now tall. So they're starting to become shorter and taller.
Yep.
And so we're losing that.
We're losing. Yeah. It's
and I just find that odd.
We're chasing our tails.
Obviously, an option is going to a 20-round magazine. Nobody wants to go down in rounds, but if you're putting it in a bag or something where you want to be able to rapidly deploy it, that's going to make more sense. It's not going to get hung up. And maybe iron sights, depending on how you store it, are less likely to get hung up. But that's my own complaint right now is with the height of these things now is getting out of control.
You know,
when
and
everything else is better.
And like Barry Duke of Duke Defense, I mean, he came up with an angled iron sight system that is super, super low profile that, you know, that we've run on a couple different platforms. I don't have it on this Rattler, but I mean, that, you know, that's an option too. If, you know, if guys like that peace of mind of optics, but they want that, you know, again, it comes down to personal preference. But I am an iron sights.
I'm a big iron sights.
Big proponent of iron sights
platform. Yeah.
So
I don't have any complaints other than I'm a big aesthetics guy.
Yep.
So, and a lot of us are.
Yeah.
And
it's got to look cool.
I always used to use that as a disclaimer, like, well, you know, who cares about how it looks? But you know, that's not the case with a great majority of us.
If that's the case, why don't we?
Yeah, just make them look like turds and make them real inexpensive, make them functional, and slide them out the door. I feel like I wish this gun had a little bit more finished look to it.
Yep. It's almost like
does it need it? It doesn't need it, but I feel like there's maybe something still missing there.
Right. I agree. It's almost like, you know,
it's too plain.
Yeah, exactly. It's too plain. It's almost like Sig was like, hell, man, this thing is super functional. This is where we're gonna leave it.
Yeah.
Though it is. I mean, it's super functional, but like there's something, and I don't know what that something is.
And that's the thing is, I was gonna say I don't know. We don't want to add unnecessary cuts and things that increase machine time and increase cost.
Increase price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's not necessary, but that's the only thing when I look at it. When you see it in its entirety with the suppressor and the optic and the size, it's like, wow.
Right.
When you take those things off, it's like, is it done yet?
And I don't know if that is, you know, they've got a little nubbed, and I'll use that term loosely, a little nubbed brass deflector. You know, we're used to seeing brass deflectors that are sticking off the side. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the anodizing or the Parkerizing on it.
Yeah.
You don't know. But I'm with you.
Flat finish, which operationally you would want, right?
You want that dull finish that's non-reflective. So I don't know. It's it's a pretty gun, like you said. Once you have everything on it,
it's decked out.
But when it's not, you're like, ugh.
I feel like I
spent my money on this.
Yeah, it's just I was something. I don't know what that is,
But like, so, I mean, it's an expensive gun. It's a pricey gun, isn't it? It's $27 roughly for the SBR. It's about $2,700.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
It's not cheap, but what you're getting with it is again, I keep going back to that survivability or that peace of mind for survivability. That is defensive shooting,
right? And at some point, personally, and the people that I'm around, and we discuss these weapons and where we're trying to get. At some point, you want to retire with a weapon and not have to, okay, it's been 4 months, which is, look, if you want to collect guns and go through that process, I understand we're all guilty of it at some level. But at some point, I don't want to have to wait for the next platform. I want to go, this is the platform. It works. And now I want to develop and grow with that.
Right.
Now, that being the case, the price point, 22 something, can't remember what it is. 27. MSRP is $27.27.
Right. So street price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, if you feel like this is the one and you're going to use it and utilize it in those things that we talked about, whether it goes with you, whether it stays at home, and you keep it, then I don't know that it's such a bad investment.
Right.
And I don't know how much you expect it to cost, by the way.
Exactly. Like
it's not going to be $1,200.
Yeah.
It's not.
Nope. I mean, you know, a lot of people, a lot of manufacturers. I mean, you hear a lot of with pretty much, I would say, all the main like big manufacturers, like, oh, they like their stuff, you know, and they like their stuff so much.
They're proud of it.
Yeah, they're proud of their proud of their products, so they're obviously proud of their price as well. But I mean, you're absolutely right, man. I mean, it's, you know, you're getting that quality with it.
I'm going to assume it's going to run.
Yep.
I don't have enough rounds to have made mine malfunction, but I'm going to assume it's going to run. And when I had tested one out at SIG, I was shooting 100-yard groups at an inch and better with various ammo.
Right.
And, you know, this thing was set up with a horrible stock as far as for shooting off a bag, shooting prone, and a big scope. So eye relief was bad. Everything was off, and it was shooting well. So it's got, I think, what it needs to be a long-term weapon.
For me, you know, we just completed all of our suppressed shooting with it. You know, and not one malfunction, and it ran. It ran between you know, Hornady Supersonic, Hornady subs, the new black ammo, and you know, the and SIG's 220 grain. So
did you use the adjustable gas block? Did you run it on suppressed? And
yes,
is that how you ran it?
Yep. Okay. Yep. So, and I hadn't had a single hiccup with it. Again, the stock is not what I would have chosen off the cuff. As a matter of fact, I have a request into SIG, you know, for us to outfit it with an actual carbine stock, just to take all variables out of it, and give it the credibility that it needs as it pertains to accuracy. So, you know, there's more to follow on that, and you know, I don't see that weapon system being anything but that force multiplier in your defensive needs here in the States.
Yeah, it's definitely slick. Definitely slick done.
So with that, you know, it's been a good one. You know, we feel like with this market of black guns, with all the sound bites and everything that we're hearing and seeing that's out there, check the Rattler out. I think you'd be kind of doing yourself a disservice if you don't. At least give it the opportunity to see if it meets your hard end use needs.
Yeah, and you can do it in the pistol version too. So for those that want to have the brace on there and, you know, use it that way, and it's a pistol, you can carry it across state lines. Obviously, when you're following the letter of the law of state carry, depending on where you are, I mean, it's a good package.
Yep, I believe so. So we have a review coming out on it on the brasstacks.com here very shortly. So be sure to check that out. And in the interim, head over to sigsauer.com and check out the Rattler. Plenty of videos, plenty of information out there. So with that said, this is Scott and Sean with the Narrative Unsuppressed Gun Talk Radio. We're out of here.
Peace.